Folks, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange podcast. No music on this one because my iPad is crapped out. And so we'll just get right into it wherever you listen throughout the world. We thank you so much for listening to the A to Z Sports Big Orange podcast. We talk everything Vols every week. And if you want to listen to that on the reg, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed. When you get there, rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe, because if you do, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is one right now at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and that means that we are live on YouTube. Go to the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, because if you get the notifications, you'll be notified when we go live. You can come hang out with us, be a part of the show. We love going back and forth with everybody. It's always a great time. And so at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports. I just noticed that I have the wrong banner up, and it says Austin Stanley under Zach right now. I can get that corrected. Oh, look at that. Zach Reagan back in the driver's seat there. Where was I? A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach writes on the internet. Zach, you were on vacation last week. What's up, man?
Yeah, it was good to get out of town there for a little bit and enjoy some sun and sand and get back to it here before football really gets going. SEC Media Day is coming up next week. I mean, that's kind of like the unofficial kickoff to everything football, because NFL training camp follows shortly thereafter, and be all football all the time until middle of February.
Yeah, I'm going next week myself to get out of town. Got to go decompress from the unbelievable amount of stress from that World Series, from that College World Series. Obviously, it was amazing, but no, it's going to be good to get away next week. We probably, first of all, our show would happen before Heupel and everybody speaks at SEC Media Day, so we probably would have done it after that anyway. So maybe we'll do a segment. I don't think we're going to do an entire show next week. I'll put it that way. So just fair warning to everybody there. Look out for a clip on YouTube. Maybe we'll also put it up on where our podcasts are sold to.
It reminds me of that time that you were like laying in a bed with the view behind you, kind of doing a show a couple summers ago.
Yep, that was in Sedona, Arizona, which unbelievable view. If you've never been there, it really is incredible. And yeah, I had to take time out to do my job here. What are you gonna do? Even on vacation, UT Sports never stops. But got a great show for everybody today. Got the SC Media Days, as I just mentioned, right around the corner, and I am talking a week from tomorrow, right? I think is when it starts. And we're going to discuss all that, sort of what we're looking out for, if anything at all. And then recruiting. Austin and I hit on recruiting last week, but there's been even more updates. We're going to get up to date on everything with Tennessee football recruiting. Then also the transfer portal with baseball. We could have mentioned it last week, but not enough had happened yet. And then there's been some real developments with the baseball team, the transfer portal. We're going to talk about all of that today. But that'll be right after I tell you about Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. So plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Shout out to them. Go get yourself a health plan. Okay. So SEC Media Days coming right up for Tennessee. And they announced today officially who the attendees are going to be. That was kind of odd because in years past, they've done it a lot further ahead of time. If I'm remembering correctly there. But no, they announced today. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, it'll be Nico, right? I mean, Nico's going to be your starting quarterback. And that's the dude that always shows up. Joe Milton was last year, but he's not going to be there. It's actually going to be Cooper Mays, Omari Thomas, two dudes that I think make a ton of sense. And then a third guy that when you think about it makes a ton of sense, but it's kind of an interesting selection in Keenan Peely, who is a transfer, who's in his, I think his 41st year of college. He's something like that, 41st, 42nd year at the collegiate level. It's crazy how long his career has been. But it should be a great crew regardless. But just first take at your first glance of the three that are going to be there for Tennessee, Zach.
I certainly wasn't surprised to see Cooper Mays or Omari Thomas. I believe Thomas was in Nashville last year with Tennessee along with Joe Milton, and I can't remember the third that was there last year. But I think if you had betting odds on that, it probably would have been like minus 500 that those two guys were going to be there. They were kind of no brainers. That third spot, that was the one that we were all kind of watching, wondering who it might be. You mentioned Nico. I wasn't surprised that it wasn't Nico. In fact, I probably would have been a little surprised if it was, just because he's a redshirt freshman. He has, one start under his belt. You had all that stuff back. I mean, it seems like years ago now after all that's happened in the last couple of months, especially with Tennessee winning the College World Series, that you had the questions about Nico's NIL deal and obviously the lawsuit that followed and, the face-off against the NCAA, which looks like Tennessee's, pretty much won that deal. There'll be some arguments there, I'm sure, still to be heard, but you don't want to have Nico peppered with any of those questions, especially after that's kind of removed from everyone's mind. I'm sure it might come up at some point. A lot of these reporters, they don't get to see these guys any other time of the year except this week. So you shield Nico from that. You shield Nico from some of the Heisman talk that's already surrounding him. You shield him just in general from all those questions that starting SEC quarterbacks get. And I think that's probably a smart thing. I think Nico would handle it just fine. I mean, we've seen the maturity that he's operated with since he was a high school student, way before he arrived at Tennessee. But still, you like to protect your player there. Keenan Peely, to me, I was surprised it was Keenan Peely. Like you said, it does make sense just because of his experience, how long he's been around. And I do think he's developed into a leader for Tennessee last season, even while he was sidelined. He's played in one game, in a Tennessee uniform, even though he's 26 years old. He has one game wearing that jersey. So it's just odd. Not that I think it's a bad decision by Josh Heupel in Tennessee at all. I'm not questioning the decision. Obviously, we don't know what all goes on into those decisions behind closed doors. I just, like Jason mentioned in the comments, thought Brew would go. I thought Brew McCoy would have been maybe an obvious choice. Squirrel White, maybe, he's entering his third year. Dylan Sampson, running back, who's really developed into a key team leader for Tennessee, really immediately after the Citrus Bowl last season, challenging his teammates to put in the work this offseason, as soon as they got back to Knoxville. I thought one of those three guys would have made sense. You probably want to spread it out with the position groups, but even, Javante Spraggins, if you wanted to double up with offensive linemen, he's been around a while. Wouldn't have been a surprise to see him go either. So really with Peely going, maybe it's telling just how important he is to this team. I mean, we know he's going to be an important player. We saw just in the limited time that we saw him last season in that game against Virginia before he got hurt. How good he is in pass coverage, his instincts, and probably beyond the field. I know they said he kind of operated as another coach while he was injured last season. He was always around coaching guys up. So maybe his leadership is, just a lot more important to this team than we realized. I think that would be the big takeaway from him being included as one of the three that's going to Dallas next week.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting selection with Peely, but I think it's a really, really good sign, because it probably speaks to the dude that he is behind closed doors and kind of the leader in the room that I think there have been clear signs that he is in the past. And he's the quarterback of the defense in a de facto way. The linebacker gets referred to that way a lot. And so I think that it's a great selection. And I honestly think it really speaks to the fact that Josh Heupel just never wants anything to happen in media. He just wants it to be the most uneventful, and you can get your sound bites, but they're gonna be bland and they're gonna be corporate, and these are the dudes that can deliver that, and it's great. I mean, Cooper Mays, perfect for that. Omari Thomas, last year Did anything crazy happen with Amari Thomas? No. I mean, the one wild card last year was Joe Milton. He ended up saying he would never lose in the state of Florida. Look how that worked out. So maybe he's thinking,
Forgot about that.
yeah, and maybe it's there was even a consideration there. I don't think he considered Nico because he is, yeah, I mean, he's just too young and he's going to be there next year. You got to think as long as everything works out correctly and the way that it should with Nico on at the helm for Tennessee there. But I just think that Keenan Peely, he's 39 years old, and it's going to be good with him out there. Knows what to say, carries himself well, leader in the room, and I think it's great. And I'll turn that around and say, with that said, that Heupel really likes nothing to happen at media events. What are you expecting, if anything, Zach, out of this? Because I mean, I'm searching for stuff. There's not like some kind of there's no quarterback battle. There's no I don't know what's it gonna be, because there's always something, right?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear about the lawsuit. I think Heupel will be asked about that. I think Nico obviously will be a big question, and those will be some redundant questions that we've heard, for the last year. And Heupel will say the same things about Nico that he said for the past year plus, his maturity and being a leader and great teammate and humble and all those things. I think the next biggest thing probably is the Oklahoma game where you're coming in there and Tennessee's playing Oklahoma. It's their first conference game, so it's super relevant. It's not like it's a game at the end of the season. I mean, it's right off the bat there in like week 3, I think, September 21st. Bob Stoops, I'm sure that's going to be asked of Heupel, the relationship specifically. I mean, he was asked about Oklahoma last season, when everything kind of got moved up a year with Oklahoma and Texas joining. And they just asked about the complicated relationship. And Heupel was very vanilla, said it wasn't that complicated, had great memories. Nobody really pressed him on Stoops or anything like that. I think he's going to get some of those questions this year. He hasn't really had like a direct Bob Stoops question, I don't think, since he's arrived at Tennessee, and really not many at all, even after that happened at Oklahoma and he's at UCF down the road. So this will be the first time I think he really gets put on the spot in a room full of people. And I'm sure he's going to have the answer. He knows it's coming. He's a super smart guy. He's not going to be caught off guard. I mean, we're sitting here talking about this a week, 8 days before it happens. We know it's coming. Heupel obviously knows it's coming. He's been around. He knows how this works. I think that'll probably be, depending on how he answers it, the biggest story that comes out of the day for Tennessee. Beyond those few things, I think it'll be, what do you think about the defense this year? The secondary, it's revamped. You got a lot of newcomers there. Your defensive line, how do you feel about that? There were some big comments made about the defensive line in the spring. I think it was Tim Baines that said he thinks Tennessee might have the best defensive line in the nation. Offensive line depth, just some things like that, football questions. Outside of that, there's not a lot of drama. He might get asked some feel-good questions about Tennessee and going to Omaha and sitting with Peyton Manning and Morgan Wallen and the basketball program and the vibes that we like to talk about. I mean, hopefully it's that line of questioning, because he's fortunate that he's not in a Philip Fulmer type situation where he has to avoid even going or stepping into a state or anything like that he's just dreading. I think he's in a good spot, unlike some other coaches in the SEC, like a Billy Napier, who's on the hot seat and is involved in a lawsuit now from a player that is at Georgia now, and then Kirby Smart's going to be dealing with that question on his side of things, and Sam Pittman obviously on the hot seat at Arkansas. They're going to have a lot tougher road. This should be a pretty easy one for Josh Heupel.
Yeah, I hope so. Although I would really like to see him get asked, and not in like a malicious way, but somebody maybe from Oklahoma media, maybe. I truly do not know if they have like long-term stalwart guys, a Brent Hubbs, somebody like that that's just been around for forever and a day, who could ask, hey, I was there at the time. You guys had a falling out. How do you feel about that? I would love to see Heupel get asked that. And again, not in a malicious way, but genuinely to see how he would answer that question, because he's so guarded just and kind of aloof when it comes to all that stuff. And let me be clear, good. I don't want a coach that's spouting his mouth off, turns around, looks like an idiot, doing all of these things. And or it could be the exact opposite with Jeremy Pruitt, where you you, you just can barely put a sentence together. It's kind of two sides of the coin there, and he ends up landing in the middle a lot of time. Just a lot of milk toast coach speak, goes out there, says what he needs to say, gets down. I would like to see him, for lack of a better word, confronted about that in a non-contentious, just real way. Because it's a super interesting storyline. I mean, the guy won a national championship for this school, and then had some sort of falling out for the guy that was his coach at the time. And like the story is that Stoops sort of chose his brother over Heupel. Heupel became the scapegoat when it really should have been Stoops' brother. And however you want to believe that, I would love to hear him talk about that though. And he would skirt around it. He knows it's coming. And that would be fine. But I at least want to see that. And otherwise, I mean, it's going to be Nico on the offense. It's going to be the DBs on the defense. It's going to be, what are you looking to improve on the defensive side of the ball? James Pierce looks great. What do you really like about his game? A lot of stuff like that. Your rote media questions, especially the guys from Knoxville, they love to just put stuff up on a tee. Not to say, I mean, that it's to get sound bites. That's what they do. And it's not, they're not being like paid by UT or anything. It's great when you get a good sound bite about a good player coming up for the season. So they ask those questions. It's going to be a lot of that. And otherwise, I'm just kind of excited to see the season being so close. Talked about, we already said it. Baseball carried us so far that now you're only 2 weeks removed from SEC Media Days when all of that ended. And so now we can just turn to this, and it should be a whole lot of fun. I'm ready to waste time in my lunch break and watch. When is Heupel actually going up?
Next Tuesday, the 16th. It's in the afternoon time slot, so it'll be after lunch. So not very productive hours on a Tuesday.
Yeah, you got nothing better going on. Flip it on SEC Network. It'll be there. But they'll
be doing interviews all day. You know how that kind of works. They're breaking out with local media, doing stuff with ESPN, SEC Network. Yeah, so there'll be stuff all day.
Yeah, I've been to SEC Media Days a few times over, and never. I mean, obviously never in Dallas. Nobody's been to it in Dallas because it's never happened there before. But I'm a little, as a sort of person that worked in it and a kind of media nerd of sorts, I'm interested to see if it changes at all, kind of anything different, especially with the 16 teams now, because I think it's gradually gotten more and more guarded, where it was pretty, you couldn't get one-on-ones with guys, but they would just do pool interviews with almost everybody, kind of in back rooms and stuff. And now I don't know if that's going to still be the case. I guess we'll see. But beyond that, I guess we didn't really get to talk about, speaking of Oklahoma and Texas now officially in the SEC. They both had these giant parties. They freaked out, especially Texas fans. Texas thinks they're going to come in here and win the SEC this coming year. And they think they're going to run this joint, even though, we mentioned with Austin last week, the last two sporting events that Tennessee played them in, they beat Texas. So, whoop-de-doo. They have a good football team. They definitely do. What are you going to do about it? At the same time, it is a football team. Again, something I mentioned with Austin last week. Football team that lost to Washington, and a Washington team that, in my personal opinion, would have gone like 9-3 in the SEC last year. So I don't know that I would just be pumping my chest out, getting ready to hold that trophy up already. But did you have any thoughts about that? Just because you missed it last week, it's been an interesting week so far.
I mean, you've added two tough teams to the SEC that are going to be title contenders, I think. In that tier, especially now with the expanded playoff, I think you've got a tier of teams. I mean, Georgia is obviously at the top, and Alabama has been. They're to be determined where they'll slot in with the new coach with Saban gone. I think after that, I think Tennessee's in that group. I think LSU's in that group. Oklahoma, Texas, Florida when they're right, and I'm sure they'll be right again at some point. And Auburn, when they're right as well. I think those are the teams that are kind of in that tier that, we saw 2 years ago at Tennessee, they would have been in the playoff after going 10-2 in the regular season. All those teams are going to be capable of making the playoff, and if you got the right guy under center, making a run. But as far as them straight up coming in and winning the SEC in year one, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a big enough believer in Quinn Ewers at quarterback, and he's been injury prone at times. He's likely going to miss some time. Arch Manning's going to have to play, I would assume, as the backup at some point. And despite his name, he's a complete wild card. What you're going to get out of him, and in Oklahoma, they're they going with a young quarterback as well, and Jackson Arnold. You can't expect him to come in and just light the world on fire either in year one. He's the same class as Nico. I think they might be. I think they're happy to be in the SEC, but they might be feeling a little overconfident if they think it's going to be easier than life in the Big 12. I mean, life for them, life for teams in the SEC is going to be a little more difficult because there's 2 quality teams you have to play every season. But at the same time, I mean, we all know life in the SEC is a lot tougher than life in what the Big 12 was. It's not going to be nearly as easy to get to that playoff, even with it being expanded coming into the SEC.
Yeah, you're not going to be playing Baylor,
Kansas, even though they're a little better now. Yeah.
So sometimes Vandy crosses your path. Sure, that does happen. Thankfully, Tennessee gets lucky, gets to play them every year. At the same time, we get the joy of playing Alabama and Georgia every year. And
even the teams like Vandy, you throw Vandy out there, and there's been times when they've been a formidable opponent, especially for Tennessee. But what's easy in the SEC anymore? Arkansas with Pittman on the hot seat, Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby. I mean, those aren't easy automatic win games. Both those teams are on Tennessee's schedule this year, and Tennessee should win those games. But if they lost either of those games, I mean, we'd be probably pissed off. We'd be down. It would suck. But would you be completely shocked? I don't think so. I mean, it's not like losing to when they lost to Georgia State. I mean, that's shocked. Losing to even Mississippi State or Arkansas, those are games you have to play every week that you don't really think about, that are just tough games. I mean, they're talented players, a lot of future NFL players, and those are not easy games to win. I don't care what team you are.
No, and they'll find out. Obviously, I'm a be 100% hater. I hope that they both go 0-12 this coming season. I have no love
unless one of them goes Georgia. I think Texas does.
Yeah, I believe Georgia actually goes to Texas. It's gonna be a tough game. I mean, Texas went into Alabama last year, was one of Saban's worst teams that ultimately ended up being in the playoff. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know that Jalen Milroe is just the truth and the dude that Bryce Young was, but
if Tennessee doesn't completely collapse in the second half in Tuscaloosa, then Alabama's out in the playoff, and people looked at that team a little different than, if Joe Milton beat them, it's probably not as impressive that Quinn Ewers beat them.
Yeah. So I'm definitely invested in them both failing initially because definitely Texas more than anybody.
Got to pay your dues.
Exactly. You don't just come in here and run this joint. Missouri for what, like 10 seconds, they did that. They won 2 SEC championships in a row in their first 4 years. I don't know how long they've been in the league at that point.
I think 2012 was their first year because Tennessee lost to them. Was that was that an overtime game? I think that was the last Dooley year. So,
oh boy,
I feel like Tyler Bray threw for like 500 yards and they still lost, something like that.
That does sound right. And then they pretty much sucked after Gary Pinkel left, and they've sort of stunk ever since until last year, which maybe a flash in the pan. Maybe they'll still be good. They do have that quarterback still. Anywho. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, and it's going to be interesting to see those guys at SEC media days and see how they handle it, because Lord knows there's far more interest in SEC media than there has ever been for them in the Big 12, and so it's going to be a time. I'm ready for it. But before we move on to football recruiting, anything else with SEC media days that you want to cover, Zach?
No, I'm just glad it's finally here. It's that time of year now where you get start getting to the middle of summer, and you start feeling football. It's not quite in the air yet, but you can see it's just around the corner.
It is close. We are closing in. Praise be. Speaking of that, let's talk a little bit more football, specifically the recruiting situation with Tennessee. It's good, maybe getting even better with some potential guys that could be coming in. And I'll tell you about it right after we talk about Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee that's bringing sports betting to a whole new level. And when you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to a $100 no danger first wager if your first bet loses. You'll be reimbursed for that amount up to $100. But there's even more good news. Zen Sports offers a one-of-a-kind VIP rewards program. And if you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sporting events, concerts, you name it. There are even sportsbook bonuses. And the VIP program is by invite only. So check it out at zensports.com/VIP. What are you waiting for? Zen Sports offers true odds on all parlays. So get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That is Zen Sports. Betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. No danger. First wager limited to plus 500 odds to qualify. Boosted odds are derived from equivalent parlay bets offered in Tennessee. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. Zen Sports. Huge thanks to them. Now, as far as recruiting goes, I hadn't been paying incredibly close attention because of baseball. And I have been, had noticed when these commitments had happened and things, but now locked back in a little bit more on the general movements of what's happening, where Tennessee stands with some of these guys going forward. Austin and I talked last week about the set of guys that Tennessee's gotten in the last, at this point, 20-ish days, maybe the last month. Marion Dye, Trey Poteet, Douglas Utu, Charles House, Nick Moore. It's been a bit of a haul. They've moved all the way up. I think the last time I looked, let's get an update on this. Tennessee was at 13th in team rankings. Let's see where we're at. 16th now. And for the 2025 class, still coming together. And one of the things that's really coming together is that there's still some dudes out there that are high level, big time recruits that you could still lock down. I would say primary among those is offensive lineman David Sanders, who, is highly sought after, but he announced that he will be choosing his school on August 17th. You wrote some about David Sanders today. I don't want to say this absolute must for Tennessee, but let's be honest, you got to get these dudes to have a championship football team. So what did you have to say about David Sanders today?
Yeah, it feels like it's a battle that, like you said, Tennessee has to win. It's not one of those, like, you're not going to be mad at Josh Heupel if he misses on David Sanders, because it looks like it's Tennessee or Ohio State. I know Nebraska, surprisingly, is in his Final Four along with Georgia. But really, it seems like Ohio State or Tennessee. So you've really out recruited Georgia to this point, assuming Georgia really is a tier below Ohio State and Tennessee in this battle. You've out recruited Clemson and Dabo Swinney. Sanders, I think, grew up cheering for Clemson. He's from Charlotte, not far from Clemson. That seemed like a pretty big obstacle to overcome. You've out recruited South Carolina. You've out recruited Alabama. I mean, you've done everything you can do. I don't see how Tennessee could, knock this out of the park anymore at this point. But you're right, to win a championship, you have to win guys like this. But at the same time, there's only so much you can do. It's kind of, if you're sitting there looking at a couple of Yetis and you got two Yeti coolers that you absolutely love, and one's blue and one's red, and you love them both equally, but you can only buy one. You're gonna finally settle on one, and you're gonna be like, did I make the right decision? Or I still wish I could have went with the other one. Whatever the case, I feel like that's where David Sanders is at right now. He's going to be happy probably at either place, but he has to choose one. Tennessee's done really well. Ohio State's done really well in this. Ohio State, though, has a longer history of putting guys in the NFL at this point. Even though Tennessee's doing better there under Josh Heupel, they're getting guys drafted. Ohio State has a lengthy history of, like, look, we've done it under Jim Tressel. We've done it under Urban Meyer. We're doing it under Ryan Day at this point. Like, you're going to go to the NFL. you're a 5-star guy. As long as you play well, you're going to be a first-round pick. They can sell that. It's a little tougher for Tennessee, even though, you got Darnell Wright that was a first-round top 10 pick a couple of years ago. You do have that as evidence to point to, and I think that helps. But, if he goes with Ohio State because of that, it's hard to fault the kid. It's not what we want. Obviously, it's not what Tennessee fans want. But just objectively looking at it from, 10,000-foot view, he's got to pick one of them, and it feels like a coin flip at this point. So, yes, you have to win it, but no, nobody did anything wrong at Tennessee if you don't. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I would agree with that generally. We've said it a lot on this show. The facts of life, as hard as they are to deal with, is that to win championships in football, you have to have elite recruits. It just is what it is. Baseball, little different, where you can have just a team that's playing right at the right time. Basketball is kind of like that also, although you see, if you just put together a really dang good basketball team, you win 2 national championships in a row like UConn. But that both of them are kind of similar in that you don't have to just have elite across the board, because weird things can happen and all. With football, it is just look historically. A team with a number 16 recruiting class does not win a national championship. It's just not. And so what you have to do is get guys like David Sanders and move up and have those elite dudes. But because, and I would say especially because you have a Nico Iamaleava right now, and then you have a George McIntyre in the holster, and you have a window right now with Josh Heupel's offense and the ability that you're going to have there, where if you can put all the right dudes in the right places, fortify that defense, have more James Pierces and guys like that, I mean, the opportunity is there. The window's going to open for Tennessee, and so you need to walk on through. You gotta. We talked about it after that national championship with baseball, that hopefully that's kind of the catapult that takes all of Tennessee over with basketball and football, women's basketball again, and all of these things where now you look at them and you go, all right, it's your turn. Let's go. And with football, this is how you do it. You got to get these dudes. And it's not going to be the end all be all, the end of the world if you don't get him, but it's just that much harder to get to that precipice. Can you make this 12-team playoff with the number 16 recruiting class to Mary? Yeah, I think you absolutely can. You said it. I mean, Josh Heupel had. I don't want this to sound mean, because I genuinely don't mean it in a rude way at all. He had a bit of a ragtag group in 2022, and he would have made the playoff. Like, can you make that playoff? 100% you can. And you can maybe even make it multiple rounds. But will you win a national championship against a team like Georgia without those elite dudes after they've just been stacking elite on elite on elite on elite on elite? No, you just won't. And so the stuff, it's key. And so you got to look at these and say, all right, Ohio State is great. Figure out a way. Obviously, Ohio State is they are pushing their chips to the middle of the table this year. And Lord knows if it doesn't work out, it might be a tough day for Ryan Day, but they're great historical program that's done a lot in recent years, but you have to figure out a way to win these. So hopefully they do. We'll see again, August 17th. It's going to be big. And he's not the only one. Tennessee obviously has a pipeline, lots of big visits and things happening. But that was just a big one. You wrote about it today. And so it's just huge. You got to get these recruits in the door. And no other news and notes. I haven't heard a ton outside of just general predictions. I think Tennessee got a crystal ball for another high-level player recently. I'm blanking on the kid's name because we've been talking about so many different guys. But
there's been a couple of predictions out there. One of them is the Perlette. What's it? Jaden.
Yeah, Perlotti. Jaden Perlotti.
Yeah,
that's who it was.
Committed to Georgia. I mean, that's one that if you can flip him from Georgia, he's a 4-star.
It'd be huge.
Yeah, and you look, like we just talked about with Sanders, you've probably out-recruited Georgia there for Sanders. You beat Georgia out last year for Mike Matthews. I mean, it came out that Georgia really threw some NIL money at Matthews at the very end to try to get him to flip. He's a Georgia native, and he 5-star wide receiver, and he signs with Tennessee over Georgia. You get him in the boat obviously last year. If you can get this linebacker, you get Sanders, and you beat Georgia out for those. I mean, that sends a message to Kirby Smart. It sends a message
For
to
sure.
Athens. It's like, Tennessee's doing it. It's not going to happen overnight. It was never going to happen overnight. Tennessee wasn't in a situation like Georgia was when Kirby Smart took over, where they're winning 9-10 games a year. It was a pretty stable program. Obviously we know what shape Tennessee was in. Like you said, Heupel didn't inherit a great roster. He had some talented players on that roster. Obviously, you had a Jalen Hyatt, one of Blitnikoff that you inherited. You had, a first-round pick in Darnell Wright that you inherited. Could have been a first-round pick at quarterback in Hendon Hooker that arrived right before you took the job. So you had some guys, but it wasn't a playoff caliber roster by any means. I mean, you had national media guys, laughing at Tennessee, saying it would be years before they even played in a bowl game again, and they played in one his first season. But it was never going to be just an overnight deal where Tennessee starts landing 5-star recruits. You got to have some, you got to show some sustained success, and Tennessee's done that under Heupel. Winning 9 games last year, it felt like a disappointment for Tennessee fans, but they've only seen a couple of those seasons in the last 15 years. So it was a pretty good year for a team that didn't really have a strong quarterback in Joe Milton. You got to keep having year after year like that, and you build up 5 or 6 of those years, and you start inching up in the rankings, and suddenly you're finishing with a number 8 class and number 5 class, and you can get into that top 5. And once you're in that top 5, I don't really think it matters where you're at in that top 5, because everyone's going to evaluate a little different, and you got so many recruiting services at this point that everybody's all over the place with a lot of these rankings. You're in that top 5. I think you're right where you need to be. If you can stay there consistently around there, and you can compete for championships year in and year out, absent of any injuries.
To just tell the details there, Chad Simmons at On 3 predicted the flip from Georgia to Tennessee. I was looking through to see if anybody else at 247 had said anything like that. There wasn't any, but on Travis Smith Jr., who
that's another one you're battling Georgia for.
Yep, he's a Georgia lean and has been predicted to Georgia as recently as last month. The writer from Dogs 247 now predicts Tennessee as of that was today. Earlier,
that's
today,
pretty telling.
Yeah, so I mean, if you end up winning both of those and you get David Sanders, like, that's the momentum that you need. That's excellent. That's great, and I think it would probably move you up into a top 10 spot, and that's awesome. And that's how they need to close out here with this class, and hopefully they will. We'll see, obviously, because speaking of baseball, as we mentioned before, hopefully catapulting the football team. The baseball team has the number 1 recruiting class in America, and baseball is always a little weird because you can get guys that get taken in the MLB draft, and they don't ever end up on campus. But you also have the transfer portal with baseball right now, and there's been some pretty serious action with Tennessee there, coming and going. As far as the transfer portal goes, you had some guys exiting. Robin Villeneuve, Bracky Lowry, they leave. Both guys that I thought had a chance to contribute, especially Robin Villeneuve. But hey, maybe it was because of some of these transfers that are coming in, and then you get guys who are some of the top guys out of the transfer portal choosing Tennessee. Top among them, Gavin Keelan, I believe is how it's pronounced. I watched some videos of him. That's how they pronounce his name. He's from second base from Louisville and was really solid in the ACC. And then today, you got a kid from Niagara University who he's a
first baseman.
First baseman. I'm sorry. Keelan, let me say, I think the prediction is for Keelan to play shortstop, even though I think he was a second baseman.
No, I think he played a lot of shortstop at Louisville.
Was he shortstop? Okay.
But that's an interesting one too, because he could play anywhere up the middle, those guys. And you've got Antigua that is really good defensively for Tennessee. I don't know what the plan is there. Good options to have, either way. A lot of these guys are athletes. Most of these guys, if they're right-handed, they probably came up playing shortstop, and then they just get moved to, look at the San Diego Padres roster right now. Half those guys in the All-Star game all came up as shortstops. So you kind of move those guys wherever they need to be. They're athletes.
Yeah, Antigua, he just hasn't been able to get that bat going at all. And maybe you can make that happen this offseason. Guys obviously progress, but he's so good in that shortstop position. I hope it could work out because he is really great there. But if it doesn't, Keelan available, and he was one of the top guys out of the transfer portal. And then I was hesitating to say this name, Eric Ritazik, I think, who is the kid from Niagara, batted .396 with 17 home runs. He was the MAC Player of the Year last year. So couple of absolute dudes there. You're vying for, I think, a couple of guys from Ole Miss who are big time recruits. Fisher from Ole Miss, and I think another one there. As you can already tell, I'm getting a lot of these guys mixed up. It's a lot of names. We've been looking at a lot of recruiting stuff here, and it is not unlike some of the dudes that like VolQuest and stuff. It's not my full-time job, so apologies. But good things happening for everybody right now. I do think with Ritazik, you are competing with the MLB there. You had that guy last year, Galaney, who committed and then got taken in the draft and left. And that could happen again here. At first glance, I think it's less likely with this one, but you were kind of skeptical of that, actually.
I'm more really just intrigued to see how it plays out because he's played 4 years already. I think he's going to be a redshirt senior this fall is what it looks like. He's a redshirt junior at Niagara this past season. It's a weird thing with MLB, like you said. You don't know if these guys will get drafted when they come out of high school. If they do and they don't sign, then you got them for 3 years, right? You got to be 3 years removed. You got to be 3 years removed from high school if you go to college. You're not eligible to after that third year. But with these guys in the portal, this is kind of a new phenomenon with NIL stuff here. Guys moving around. You don't usually see a lot of fourth-year guys or fifth-year guys especially go early in the draft, like college seniors, if you want to call them that, even though he's a redshirt junior. Those guys, they every now and then one will end up, popping off as a senior and they get drafted kind of high, but most of the time those guys get picked later in the draft. They're underslot guys. You can kind of fill out a draft class with them and spend a little bit of, slot money on other guys higher in the draft to try to sign them. I'm really intrigued to see how some of these situations start playing out. If you're coming out and you've got another year of eligibility left and you get drafted in the 8th round, that's not going to be a high signing bonus. There's not going to be a lot of money you're going to be getting. Do you come back for another year and try to get a little bit of NIL money? NIL baseball money is probably not anywhere close to the same as it is for football. But you can still make some money, especially if you're going to be starting and you're going to be a big bat like this guy is. You do that, or do you go ahead and take your chance on trying to start your MLB career then, knowing that you're, as an 8th round pick, you've got a decent chance to make the big leagues. You got to go perform, but it's not necessarily a long shot if you were just a super late round guy. I don't really know what to expect with some of these situations with these guys that have some eligibility left, because it's just traditionally it's not how it's worked with baseball, but everything's had such a wrench thrown in it the last few years with NIL and transfer portal and some of the opportunities and ways that MLB teams are evaluating prospects now that I don't really know what to expect with some of these coming up.
Yeah, NIL with baseball is particularly interesting because the scholarships are less generous. Just not as many to go around. It's not as much of a revenue sport. I mean, in Tennessee, it's essentially a revenue sport. Maybe not when you're building a $100 million stadium, but and have that on the books. But there is plenty of potential there to earn a nice little paycheck. And the minors is, I knew a guy that played minor league baseball, and it's brutal. And just really, you don't get paid squat. You're on the road always, all the time, never in the same place, just kind of scrapping for your meat. And so
And most of these teams aren't in a Nashville or a Charlotte. Some of them
no,
are, but you're probably going to be in like Binghamton or some random town in, Birmingham or somewhere else in some random town in the Southeast that you've never heard of. It's not.
some dump like Birmingham.
Yeah, not only are you making, yeah, not only are you making no money, but you're in a town that's just nothing, a lot of times. So and nothing against any town like that. It's a struggle, right? Like it's not glamorous. So you're not living this glamorous life just because you got drafted. It takes a little while to get to that, unless you're Dylan Cruz that gets drafted in the top 5 and gets a huge signing bonus. It's going to be a tough road for you.
Yeah. So I'll be fascinated to see how much that pans out for a dude like this. It's kind of a tweener. Do they go, no, I'll wait for that journeyman lifestyle and I'll just stay in college as long as I can and get that paycheck there and possibly win a national championship. And I hope that he sticks around.
I would stay. I would try to compete
100%.
for a championship because you can win one at Tennessee now.
Yep.
That was a lot more fun than low A, baseball with 400 fans in the crowd. It was a lot more fun. And if you're good enough, you gotta have some confidence in your abilities. If you're good enough, you'll get there in baseball. Like it's a tough sport. It's a grind. But if you're truly good enough, you'll eventually get there. It might be when you're 28. We see it all the time. The guys making their debuts at 28, 29. It's a weird phenomenon about this sport, but if you're good enough, you'll make it. I would take the gamble, and not even for the NIL money. I mean, that would be a part of it because it's money, but just that experience of playing baseball at Tennessee, I think that's tough to pass up if you're a baseball player.
I mean, you look that this isn't the exact example of what you were talking about, but a guy that put in his time, Garrett Crochet, who now all-star, having an incredible season, and he put in his time that he left Tennessee in 2020, didn't he? And has been grinding it out ever since.
And this is the first year he's really, kind of hitting his. I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet, but he's really hitting his potential and what teams saw in him. It takes some time sometimes.
God, 25.
Not everybody's Paul Skeens out there.
No, but yeah, 25. He's born in 1999. Oh, that hurts.
That doesn't seem possible. You have to check your math on that.
Yeah, I put two and two together there. Didn't expect to feel so old, but
you just said what was 25 years ago? I'd be like, I don't know, 1980. I don't know what.
Right? It wasn't that. I think so. Oh boy. But no, great stuff. Hopefully happening for both football and baseball. I mean, I think Tony V is just gonna reload. Football needs to load, I guess, and get all of the guys that they need to capitalize on this window that they have. Because look what can happen. I said it for so long. Tennessee has every single resource you could ever need to win a national championship in any sport. Period. They are willing to invest. You have the fan base. You have the money. Like there's no excuse. So go out there and let's do it. Hopefully baseball can repeat. Football can bring us back to the promised land. We'll see. But before we bounce out of here, Zach, anything else for the folks at home?
That's just you're talking about Tony Vitello. Did you see that picture of him floating around on the boat with Peyton Manning?
I did.
That guy, I mean, who has it? Jim Harbaugh likes to, who has it better than us? Nobody. That's Tony Vitello right now. Who has it better than that guy? And then on top of that, talking about football, promised land. If football wins a championship, we know it's going to be nuts. It'll be the baseball championship times 10. I want to see Josh Heupel's victory tour. I want to see him at the parade. I want to see him catching a Miller Lite from somebody in the crowd or a Coors Light, whatever his drink of choice or whatever he gets thrown. I don't care what it is. I want to see him crushing one of those, and I just want to see what happens in that week after. Knowing him, will probably be a lot of recruiting and getting down the business. Tony Vitello doesn't have a roster of 90 or 100 that he has to look after and manage and all that. It's a little easier, but I think Josh Heupel will probably have a good time for at least a couple of days, and I think there's a lot of content possibilities that could come out of that, and just a lot of entertainment possibilities in general.
It does feel like, from what happened with baseball and how wild that was, you've seen, was it like the Eagles fans when Philadelphia won that Super Bowl? Didn't they like riot downtown? Am I making that
Pretty
up?
much. I mean, that's like, I think
It
Philadelphia's
feels
the
like,
city, they always have to like oil the lamp
yeah.
posts and stuff in the street so people aren't climbing them.
It feels like that's a real possibility if the football team wins a national championship. you might have to contend, go out and have grease on the telephone poles downtown or whatever. Maybe. No, we need to see it.
I
It
would
needs to
hope
happen.
so. I expect nothing less.
Yes. And according, I actually talked to somebody that lived downtown. It was a little raucous. It wasn't riot stuff, but after the win, apparently there were people running around, yelling "Go Vols" and doing all that stuff. Obviously for the parade. I was at the parade. That was absolutely insane. There was no rioting. There were people having heat strokes there.
Yeah. Oh, we're not like suggesting that you riot, but good times. Like, just have a good time.
I said it feels like that's on.
Oh yeah, I just want to make sure we're not inciting anything.
No. Please don't riot. I would highly encourage you not to. Please don't do that. But it feels like it's a distinct possibility. I mean, look at what we did after Lane Kiffin. The mattresses aplenty will be burned if Tennessee wins a national championship, but obviously in a joyful
There'll be
way.
some couches in people's living rooms sweating if Tennessee's taking a knee in the national championship with a few seconds to go.
some dorm room couches will be getting tossed out windows. Yeah, it'll be a great time. But Charlie Burris, Zach Reagan, thanks so much for watching. Couldn't do it without you. Billy Bob, Nikki, Jason, Chris, everybody that commented, hung out with us tonight. It is greatly appreciated. And yeah, again, probably not a show regularly scheduled next week. We'll do some segment or something after SEC Media Day, so look out for that on YouTube. Otherwise, that's it. We will talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.